The Switch Lite is 6 years old now, and with the Switch 2 here, you might think that it's outdated, but it might actually be a smarter buy in 2025, and here's why. There's actually a lot going for it. It's compact, it's cheaper, and it has a very respectable library. By the end of this video, I will tell you exactly who the Switch Lite is perfect for. So join me while we discuss the Switch Lite, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I know it's super annoying when YouTubers tell you to do that, but for a small channel like mine, it really does make a difference. Let's jump in. Let's begin with the biggest reason to get a Switch Lite, and that's the price. That's no surprise at all. The Switch 2 launched at $500, making it the most expensive Nintendo console of all time. And unfortunately, the Switch 2's library is very much lacking right now. But I do think that eventually that issue will be resolved, but it's going to take a few years. The Switch Lite, on the other hand, is ranging between $150 to $220, depending whether you get it used or brand new. On top of that, there are some really dope special editions for the Switch Lite that will cost you less than $300. My personal favorite being the Diamond and Pearl special edition Switch Lite, which will range you between $250 and $280. This is a great deal if you ask me, because that system is stunning. In my opinion, Nintendo did a much better job with the Switch Lite special editions than they did with their regular Switch, so it's nice to see that they are still decently priced. I am, however, very disappointed that Nintendo did raise the price of the Switch Lite recently, and I think it's very shady of them. Last week, I dropped a video about these price hikes, so if you're interested in my thoughts on that, check out that video after this one. But unfortunately, I do think that Nintendo raised the prices of the old Switches to steer people into buying the Switch 2, which is very frustrating because the Switch Lite is still such a great option to buy. And before we continue, I think it's important to mention why I'm choosing the Switch Lite instead of the regular Switch or the Switch OLED. And in my opinion, it does come down to price, especially with the Switch OLED. It's currently $400 brand new, and at that point, if you're going to buy an OLED, you should just buy a Switch 2. The reason to get a Switch Lite is because of how much cheaper it is than the other Switches. And you know what else it has over those other Switches? This one is actually portable. The Switch Lite stands at 3.6 inches high and 8.2 inches wide, which compared to the other Switches is a drastic difference. I do think that it works in its benefit. These are supposed to be portable consoles, and playing these consoles portably has always been my preferred way to play the Switch. However, I do want to mention that the size does take some time getting used to. If you're a regular on my channel, you've definitely heard me complain about all the hand cramps the Switch Lite has given me in the past, which did continue when I was working on this video, but it got better the more I used it. I just wanted to be fully transparent with you guys. It is something that you should be aware of. Yes, the price is nice, but the system is small and it takes some getting used to. That being said, if I'm in the mood to play a Switch 1 game, I typically still do gravitate towards the Switch Lite over my Switch 2 because it is so much more portable. It's also much lighter than the Switch 2, and it's very durable, and that durability is great if you're looking at purchasing this system for a kid. The size is great for anyone's first console, and I think it's a great starting point if you're introducing a new gamer into something other than a tablet. Please buy this over a tablet. Trust me, they will thank you later. And of course, this thing plays all of the Switch games, which there are thousands of them, and they are cheaper than Switch 2 games. Nintendo has introduced $80 games to their library now, and they have yet to drop an actual game worth that price. The original Switch has built up one of the best libraries of all time over these past 6 years, and many of the Switch 2 games coming out are still being released on the original Switch. You got the heavy hitters like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, and Super Smash Bros., and all the other like first-party Nintendo games. But my personal favorite games to play in the Switch Lite are games like Witcher 3, Digimon, Cyber Sleuth, and all of the Resident Evil games. Special shout out to all of the Resident Evil games on the Switch because they all have gyro aiming, and it is by far the best way to play Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, and the Revelation games. Thank me later for that, because trust me, they are awesome on the Switch Lite. On top of that, games like Hollow Knight, Hades, Vampire Survivors feel right at home on the Lite because it's such a portable system. I mean, I love my Steam Deck, but it's like way too big when you're trying to play shorter, more replayable games like those, because it's such a portable system. I mean, I love my Steam Deck, but it's way too big for when I want to play Hollow Knight. You know, it's too much. And systems like the 3DS and the Vita can't play all of the new indies that come out. So the Switch Lite becomes one of the most portable ways to play these new indie games. Now, I guess this is a perfect time to mention that technically the Switch Lite doesn't play all Switch games, specifically the ones that rely a lot on motion controls or detachable Joy-Cons. So a game like ARMS, kind of hard to play on the Switch Lite, but more importantly, a game like Skyward Sword, it's going to be a little bit awkward to play on the Switch Lite, since you can still technically play those if you have spare Joy-Con somewhere, because Joy-Cons still do connect to the Switch Lite, but it's just not going to be as ideal as those games would be on a regular Switch. It is what it is. But if you're looking at it from a pure game perspective, the Switch Lite still has an absolute powerhouse of a library in 2025. You're buying into a library that's not only massive, but still supported, and that's going to last for a few years, even with the Switch 2 out on the market. And there's still other limitations that the Switch Lite has that are important to mention. Some bigger than others. Obviously, you can't dock this thing, so TV mode is a no-go. The screen is smaller than the Switch OLED and the Switch 2, which honestly isn't a big deal for me. I'll take a smaller screen for more portability any day. But I do think that the biggest limitation that the system has is not having those detachable Joy-Cons for two specific reasons. And no, not because you can't play Ring Fit. And the first one being that the Switch Lite has no rumble. At first, it's not noticeable. I think if you're just playing games on the Switch Lite, you will never realize that it has no rumble. But it does become apparent if you play the same game on the Switch Lite on the regular Switch, and then you realize that it's shaking a lot more. And that's when it clicks, like, oh, hey, it wasn't doing that a minute ago. And the second reason is Joy-Con drift. Personally, I have a few Switch Lites here, and I have definitely put well over 100 hours on each of them, and I have not yet gotten Joy-Con drift. So speaking from my experience, I think as long as you are very careful while using the Switch Lite, you shouldn't have a problem, but I do think it's something that you should be aware of. So who is the Switch Lite perfect for? First, it's perfect for the budget buyer. If you don't want to drop $500 on the Switch 2, then hop on the Switch Lite train. Get yourself a nice special edition, and don't worry about buying a Switch 2 until either you get one secondhand or just wait until Nintendo inevitably drops the special edition Pokemon or Zelda Switch 2. And it's great for parents who are buying for kids. It's durable, it's cheaper to replace if they somehow break the thing. And we've already talked about Joy-Con drift, but luckily at the time of this recording, Nintendo is still fixing those for free. So just send it in if it has any problems. And of course, this thing is perfect for my handheld first players. Know there's a lot of you guys out there because y'all love the 3DS and the Vita. The Switch Lite is a great option if you want a little bit more power and those more recent games. Let's take a second to look at the Switch Lite as a long-term investment. It's still going to be supported by Nintendo for a few years, so it's likely that they won't sunset the Switch Store or repairs for a while. I mean, they just stopped fixing the 3DS like this year, and that system's like a decade old now. Also, first-party games are likely to keep being released on the Switch for at least a year. I'm guessing post 2026 is when we will likely stop seeing games coming out for both the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. And the most important thing to consider is, modding and homebrewing is eventually gonna go crazy on the Switch Lite. Hey, I might be specking on the Switch Lite. I don't know, because I missed out on the 2DS XLs back in the day. There was a ton of them at Walmart when the Switch came out, and I should have bought all of them. I probably would have been a millionaire right now. So maybe we shouldn't pass on how much of a good deal the Switch Lite is right now. Is the Switch Lite still worth buying in 2025? Absolutely. It's compact, portable, and affordable, with access to one of the most incredible libraries ever made. Sure, it has some limitations, but for many of us, these are minor trade-offs for what you're getting. If you're a budget buyer, a parent, or a handheld first player like myself, the Switch Lite is a fantastic choice. And looking at it long-term, it's supported, it's still going to get first-party releases, and the modding scene is only going to grow, making it a system that can give you years of entertainment. So if you've been on the fence, now is a great time to jump on board. Grab a special edition. Seriously, they are pretty affordable right now, and enjoy the portability, and don't stress about upgrading to the Switch 2 just yet. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful at all, please consider subscribing and let me know in the comments, are you picking up a Switch Lite in 2025 or have you already bought the Switch 2? I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, night, whatever time it is, where you're at. I hope you have a good one. Peace.